reason it's tough for you to form partnerships with certain people is because you have what you would call misaligned incentives. Misaligned incentives means that that their incentives are not the same as yours. If they benefit from your demise, then you've got a problem. So for example, I think about even my mother was saying that she was concerned about like with the stuff with the teen mobs in Chicago, and she feels like the same liberals who encouraged everything that was going on during the pandemic are going to be the first ones to go lock up all those kids who are running up and down the streets in Chicago. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that when you talk about white fear and what happened during the mass incarceration epidemic, it was really Democrats that kind of led the charge on a lot of that. It wasn't just a Republican thing. They just happened to agree on that. So he says there's an orchestrated effort to avoid black issues and to supplant them with Hispanics and other minorities. In 1972, the National Hispanic Party conceived a plan to subordinate black Americans by the year 2000 by bringing in a layer of minority ethnic groups between blacks and whites. The Hispanic empowerment strategy is to track and copy everything that black Americans do politically and economically, then offer Hispanics as a more socially acceptable alternative to blacks. Like Asian, Arab, European, gay, handicapped, and women's organizations, Hispanic organizations do not promote a black agenda, nor do they equate black and Hispanic interests. So Dr. Anderson argues here on page 192 of Powernomics, is he's basically saying that your big problem, the reason that you have all these problems that don't get solved is because there's nobody that has a specific pure black agenda. There's nobody that's saying, okay, I'm here to solve problems for the black community and nobody else. You're the only group that actually has civil rights organizations that say, we're here for everybody. We're here for poor people, handicapped people, white women, or whatever. And you're even representing groups that didn't even ask for your representation. Like, I think that's a little bit weird. So anyway, he also says that Hispanics and other so-called minorities are competing against blacks, whether the black overclass knows it or not. Some Hispanic groups are even more competitive and freely state their intent to totally displace blacks on the American agenda. In the spring of 1997, C-SPAN aired conference sessions on the Council for La Raza. Several speakers spoke openly and emphatically about how Hispanics would change the issues in this country from black and white to white and Hispanic. The number of Hispanics in the United States tripled between 1970 and 1990 and will surpass the black population by 2002. Obviously, we're 20 years too late, and you see what has happened. While Hispanics prepare to celebrate becoming this nation's majority minority population, there is little public discussion on the socioeconomic impact on black Americans. In a society that maintains a racial hierarchy, discord can be expected as groups compete for resources, especially if one group is shackled by harmful legacies. Arthur Michael Lind, in his book, The Next American Nation, spoke of Hispanics, how they inherited affirmative action and other programs that were originally designed to help black Americans because black leadership failed to protest it. Lind said, one by one, Hispanic mayors will replace black mayors, Hispanic contractors will edge out black contractors, Hispanic quotas in education and hiring will increase, Hispanics will demand their own congressional districts at the price, if necessary, of the destruction of the black majority districts. Now, what's funny to me is that you do have black politicians. Chicago just got a black mayor, and so you still have the black politicians out there, but you don't really have black politicians who are able to really put the black community at the top of the priority list. I don't think it's realistic to expect that either, because to run for office, you need a lot of money, and that money comes from people who don't really have a direct interest in supporting the black community. So the black community will probably struggle in a lot of areas, because if you don't pour into a problem, then that problem is not going to be solved. If you don't feed the baby, then the baby's going to starve. If you're not taking care of a flower, then it's not going to grow. It's going to shrivel up. And so the question that I encourage you to ask yourselves is, who is responsible? Who has resources and who is responsible and deeply committed to ensuring that the black community has what it needs? Who's responsible for making sure that there's enough economic opportunity in the black community? Who is committed, solely committed to ensuring that the black community, that the kids are being educated, that they're being fed, that the families are staying together, that they're protected? Who's doing this, right? Nobody. And a lot of the reason this isn't getting done is because the people that could do this are unfortunately stuck in the binds of economic slavery. You can't put into your community the way you want because you got to get up and go to work. So you got to, it's like if you got a parent that's at home and they're sick and they need food and they need medicine, but you have to go to work every day, then you're not going to be able to care for them the way you would want to. I had a friend that told me that. She said that I started listening to you more when my mother was on her deathbed, because when she was on her deathbed, I wanted to spend every single moment I could with her, making sure that she was as comfortable as possible. But I couldn't do that after a point because my boss told me I had to go to work. And so, and by the way, can you guys still hear me? Let me know if you can still hear me, okay? Because it looks like I froze a little bit. Let me know if you can still hear me. And here's the deal, right? So I compare that to, with my parents. I'll be quite frank. My parents, health is kind of a challenge. We're working through some stuff, and because I have a certain amount of freedom, I'm able to pour into them. I'm able to say, I'm stopping everything because I'm going to really be here for my mother. I'm going to be there for my father, right? I can't do that because I've got to go and make sure that they get what they need, right? So as a result, they're better off because I can make them my top priority. Well, why can I do that? Because I have the freedom to do that, right? The economic freedom. So the foundation for me having the freedom to be there for them the way I want to started years ago with the economic plan. So with Black people, I encourage you to really understand how your economic plan, how much wealth you build, how you build that wealth, how you manage it, what economic situation you put yourself into, forms the foundation of whether or not you can even use the word freedom and add it to the word freedom to your vocabulary. It's very hard in America for a poor working class person to truly be free. It's just really hard. I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, you could let go of any desires. You could let go of any desire to have housing or food, or, well, not food, but minimal food, no material items. I mean, there are people that do that. There are people that live in a minimalist kind of way, and minimalists actually are more economically free in many cases than people who make 10 times more money than them, because your degree of economic freedom comes down to your ability to give yourself the things that you need without having to go into situations that don't make you comfortable. The ability to say no, to walk away from stuff, right? So ultimately, you have to think about this economic freedom piece if you're ever going to talk about rebuilding a sustainable community. People that are economically free are able to do what needs to be done. They can go build what needs to be built. They can go spend time where time needs to be spent. They're not going to say, hey, I would be there helping the community, but I got to go to work. Or the celebrities, even, they say, well, I would help the Black community, but there's too much money over here. White people, so they're slaves. Some of them are slaves to greed. This might be a guy who makes 10 million a year, and he's thinking, if I go and help Black people, I'm going to lose another 10 million I could be making. He's never learned how to free himself from the greed that comes with never knowing when to say enough is enough, to say I have enough money. So here's an example of freedom and what freedom might look like. I think Kyrie Irving in the NBA is a good example of freedom. I don't know what all his politics are, but I can say that the fact that Kyrie has the fortitude to say, I don't really care if you sign me for another $300 million contract or whatever. The fact that he can even do that shows a type of awareness that is admirable. Admirable. I mean, you could define it as silly, right? Like, wait, you're giving up all that money. Look at all the things you can do with that money. I get that too, but it's admirable in the sense that he understands a few things a lot of people never understand. He understands. Wait a minute, I have enough money. Like, I don't need more money. He also understands that there are things more important than money, and he understands that he's at a point where there's only so much that they can really do to him. So he's okay with whatever that looks like. So he's not sort of constrained by in a way that certain other celebrities might be constrained. So I like where Kyrie stands, because whatever Kyrie wants to do, whatever he wants to pour into, he can do that, and he doesn't have to necessarily worry about losing anything that's going to really hurt him. Okay, so get free. If you get free, then you can kind of do what you want. And then what you'll find is that for a free person that's conscientious in terms of knowing what to do with that free money and free time, that person will tend to have a better life. They'll have better health, mental and physical. They'll have a better family. They'll have better relationships, and that community around them will be a better community because you can pour into that. You have better kids because you can spend time with your kids. You have a better spouse because you can spend time working on your marriage. You're more educated because you can spend time learning the things that you really want to learn. You're more fulfilled because you can do things that you're more passionate about. Right? So the black community, I believe the black community struggles because it gets neglected. Everybody's busy serving somebody else, so you can't spend time serving yourselves and serving each other. So so let's jump forward. So Dr. Anderson basically says that he says one by one Hispanic mayors will replace black mayors, etc. Hispanic quotas in education and hiring will increase. Hispanics will demand their own congressional districts at the expense of destruction of black majority districts. He also says he wondered what women and ethnic minorities. He wondered what black civil rights leaders would have said in the 1960s had they known that within one generation the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action and other civil rights initiatives would be well-to-do white women. Asians and Hispanics, most of these Hispanics are classified as whites and lived in Mexico, Cuba, Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala for decades after the end of the civil rights movement. Yet they now displace blacks. How do today's black leaders justify their active role in helping women, Hispanics, Asians, and other immigrants capitalize on black issues and then edge out and subordinate blacks? Political action step number 2, challenge immigration laws and public policies that have forced black people to become this nation's only non-immigrant and permanent minority. Blacks must mobilize at the grassroots level and challenge this nation's immigration policies, which force them to be the only planned permanent involuntary minority in a social democracy that operates on the premise that the majority will win and rule, and the minority will lose and be ruled. Wealth and power follow the numbers. This country was founded on the principles of liberty, opportunity, and reward for achievement, so long as you were white or could reasonably be accepted as white. In the mid-1970s, blacks made up approximately 34% of the total population. After the ratification of the U.S., pay attention now, 1700s, 34%. Let's stop right there. So you were 34% of the population back then. Does anybody know what percentage we are now? What about 11, 12, 12%, 11%? We were 34% of the population. So that was a problem. Too many black people. Let's keep going. After the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, one of the first acts of the new Congress, one of the first things they did was to enact the 1790 naturalization law that restricted citizenship to free white persons. Immigration laws have controlled black population numbers. Over the last 200 years, ethnic immigrants have bumped blacks from employment, business, education, and political opportunities and used them as a buffer against hate groups. Layer after layer of ethnic immigrants received the advantage of the fruits of black people's labor in consumer markets. Black Americans served as a safety net, assuring every ethnic group that they could never fall any lower than the highest black person. But each immigrant group's arrival brought additional harsh conditions for blacks. Throughout most of the 19th and 20th centuries, black leaders were aware of the negative impact immigrants had on black Americans and petitioned the federal government to halt open immigration until the nation had rendered justice to black Americans. So your leaders weren't always stupid. They actually used to fight these things. In the mid-1960s, however, pay attention, this is where things changed. In the mid-1960s, black leaders made 2 dramatic reversals that were to have lasting effects on blacks from which they could never recover. First, black leaders abandoned black people and reversed the commitment of civil rights from blacks to humanitarian support for all struggling people. So they went from talking about black people only, to saying we're here for everybody who's oppressed. Secondly, they not only dropped their opposition to immigration, but began to support it. These are those Jedi mind tricks that are played on you in politics, where they will get you supporting something that is directly out of your best interest. It's absolutely crazy. So let's keep reading here. All right, so we're reading Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. Powernomics.com is where you can get a copy. Let's see here. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, in the book Immigration Reconsidered, Lawrence Fuchs, a political scientist who's published widely in immigration and ethnic studies, describes the chain of events. In the mid-1960s, Cuban immigrants were flooding into Miami and displacing blacks from their service jobs. Though blacks were economically devastated, Martin Luther King Jr. decided not to pit the black economic needs against the desires of Cubans to come into this country. He referred to them as struggling minorities, and the die was cast. Almost all black leaders bought the social accommodation script. So he's connecting this with Dr. King. Fuchs states that, in part, because of King's inspiration, almost every major black leader in the country, including the mayors of several large cities and leaders of national organizations, signed an advertisement for the International Rescue Committee in 1978 headline, Black Americans Urge Admission of the Indo-Chinese Refugees. Fuchs says that King's altruistic attitude was picked up by such people as Vernon Jordan, past president of the Urban League, Benjamin Hooks, past president of the NAACP, Jesse Jackson, founder of the Rainbow Coalition, and various members of the Congressional Black Caucus. In the 1970s, Congresswoman Candace R. Collins, Democrat, Illinois, declared that, quote, Americans must continue to have an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole. So you went from representing black people to representing all of mankind. And you know that old saying that says, if you try to do everything for everybody, you end up doing nothing for nobody, right? If you try to be everything to everybody, then you become nothing to no one. It says, so just as white leaders had done for centuries, black leaders across the board put the needs of other groups before the unmet needs of black people and forgot about the competitive nature of our society. So you are playing kumbaya in a competitive game. You are in a competitive basketball game, believing that your job is to share the basketball, and nobody is sharing the basketball with you, right? So that's pretty much what Dr. Ennis is saying. So he says black people suffered a double loss when their leaders reversed their attitudes about immigration. Not only were the needs of black Americans subordinated, but so were the needs of people of African descent outside the United States. The leaders did not challenge immigration policies that prohibited immigration from black countries, committing instead to make them a little more comfortable wherever they were. They were satisfied pushing America to rid Haiti of a despot political regime rather than pushing America to extend the same immigration options to Haitians or Africans that they extended to European, Asian, and Latin American nations, just like the Ukrainians who are coming here by the boatload, and the Afghan people and all these other countries where they're bringing all these people over here. You ain't never heard about them bringing tens of thousands of Haitians to the United States. Like the first immigration law, let me go back here. Hold on. Black people remained on the bottom of the pecking order as their leaders helped competing groups come in above them. Like the first immigration law, the 1924 law declared America to be a white nation and had zero immigration quota for people of African descent. That means that if you were British and white, they would accept an unlimited number of people. The darker you got, the smaller the quota would be. When they got to the darkest, when they got to people that look like me, African people, they said that we don't want any. The number was actually zero. We want zero Africans here. That's why your numbers have dropped. That's why your vote doesn't matter in the elections. They tell you that it matters, but it matters for people unlike you. It matters for them, but it doesn't matter for you. It gives benefits to them, but it doesn't benefit you. Again, you are the chicken who was invited over to somebody's house for a chicken dinner. You were invited over for dinner and you think you're there to eat. No, you're not there to eat. You're there to get eaten. So your presence at the dinner is important. Your presence at the dinner does make sure people get fed. Your presence at the dinner is valued, but it's not going to be done in such a way that it values you. The chicken does not win. The chicken is going to get eaten. And that's what you are. You are the chicken. So let me just say this. So your vote does matter. Just remember, it doesn't end up mattering for you because they can't point to substantive benefits that the black community has experienced from voting for the same politicians over and over and over again. They just can't find examples. All right, so let's keep going. Like the first immigration law, the 1924 law declared America to be a white nation, blah, 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 blah. Let's see here. That remained in effect until the mid-1960s when it increased from 0 to 0.5%. So they went from saying we'll take zero Africans to taking 0.5%. The new immigration laws ensured that European ethnic groups, later expanded to Asians and Hispanics, remained dominant by setting new quotas based first on national origin of immigrants, then on their skills and training and family reunification. In some rare exceptions, foreigners were granted political asylum. Millions of Hispanics and Asians illegally immigrate to America and are regularly granted amnesty. For physical and ideological reasons, people of African descent do not qualify for the special exemptions. They cannot walk across the border, and since blacks around the world live under similar conditions, it is difficult to prove that they are immigrating for political rather than economic reasons. Black Americans cannot reproduce fast enough to keep up with the pace of 3 or 4 million immigrants who enter annually in this country. Who can the black man? What can the black masses do at this time? Grassroots blacks can begin by pressuring their leaders to go back and address the needs of black people. That's happening right now. That's already happening. I'm seeing some of these politicians realizing that with the new black media, when you've got people out here like the Vicky Dillards and the Tariq Nasheeds and TD Hip Hop Media and some others that are saying things that need to be heard, people are responding to that. The politicians are noticing that, and the MSNBC folks, they're trying to act like it doesn't exist, but it's too loud. They can't ignore it, and it is making a difference because they're losing elections and they don't know why, and they realize that they're going to have to start listening to people that are actually involved in the community. Black leaders can demonstrate their commitment to their own people by challenging the immigration laws, calling for national dialogue, and mobilizing black masses. Black people can relocate their places of residence to become a majority population in specific cities or regions of the country. Blacks would have a population advantage. If they were to relocate to or ethno-aggregate in 6 southern states of Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and South Carolina, they could become a significant political and economic force and impact regional and national politics. They could control the electoral votes in presidential elections. Once they become the majority population, they must begin to act like the majority. Many blacks reacted to immigration by fleeing their former neighborhoods. Blacks living in suburban areas near large urban cities could increase their political and economic impact by relocating back into key communities and cities. Local governments could offer the black middle class incentives such as tax abatements, homestead sites, as well as business, employment, and political opportunities to encourage them to relocate into black urban neighborhoods. Municipal political bodies, especially those in majority black cities, must publicly define what constitutes a quote unquote minority. If blacks were originally classified as a minority because they were legally and customarily excluded from this nation's political, economic, educational, and social resources, what is the justification for classifying ethnic, religious, class, gender, and language groups as minorities and equating them to black Americans? When were these groups shut out of the system without alternatives? Less than 1% of them were in this country when blacks were being enslaved and Jim Crow segregated. Why is the poverty of ethnic groups that came into the country in that condition equated to black poverty, which stems from 260 years of slavery? These are the kinds of questions that blacks ought to raise with both black and white leaders. So what Dr. Anderson is saying here, and I'm going to stop here on page 197 of Powernomics. He's basically saying, why in the world would you let anybody be compared to you in that way, in an inappropriate way? If somebody is poor in China, and then they come to the United States and they're poor in the United States, how is that equivalent to the poverty that a black person has in America, which is connected to their 260 or 400 year history in this country, right? There's no comparison. They're not the same. If you go to other countries and you are a poor black person and you immigrate to Russia or Ukraine or wherever, they're not going to equate you as a poor black American to a poor Ukrainian if you're both living in Ukraine. Or you go to Japan, they're not going to say, well, a poor black person from the United States is going to be put in the same box as a poor Japanese man who has roots in this country, who's really native to this country. So I think that standing up for those rights, I think that what Dr. Anderson is saying in Powernomics is that it's very important that we speak up on the things that we should be allowed to speak up on. And I know one of the moves that we're seeking to make here is I've been trying to develop this platform space for a long time because I think that my ideas I have ideas that are worth hearing, and I wanted to force my way into certain conversations. If I am speaking online and talking to hundreds of thousands of black people every single week, then that is another drop in the bucket that allows us to put those issues out there on the table and not allow people to sit there and ignore us while we're screaming in their ear. If you remember, even going back when Obama was in office, the consistent thing that you kept hearing was this weird statement from politicians saying that there is no black agenda. So somebody would get on TV and say, well, we don't know what black people want. There is no black agenda. And it was the weirdest thing. And they did the same thing when the Occupy Wall Street movement took place. They were like, well, it's confusing because we don't know what they want, right? But there were people in both situations who were saying, no, we know what we want. We could bring me on your show and I can tell you what we want. And then they wouldn't bring the person on the show because the narrative was, we want to paint you as just this confused group of people that doesn't know up from down, heads from tails. You're so stupid. You need to be led by the more mature people that are in office, or the people that the talking heads on TV. And that's the role that some of the Negroes on MSNBC and CNN have tried to take, is this idea that says, oh, these crazy people online, they're just a bunch of bots. They're Russian bots. And they're, not acknowledging the humanity of the millions of people who are saying, no, 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 we really want reparations. Like it's like, no, they're bots, and they're confused, and they're crazy, and they're weird, and they're not worth listening to. Listen to us. Listen to us. Or if you remember when the NAACP in San Francisco stepped in when they were going to give cash reparations to the residents, and that's what they still want to do, and they stepped up and said, we reject the proposal for cash reparations. Just give the money to us. Give the money to us. Because I think that that's sort of what that Black political class seeks to do. That's how they survive, right? They survive by being the middleman between massa and the masses. And then what ends up happening, unfortunately, and there's nothing really wrong with being the middleman, but there's a difference between carrying water for the oppressor versus carrying the needs of the oppressed. To speaking truth to power in that particular way. And so I really think that, generally speaking, I think we have to be a little more critical of these things. I think we have to sort of address what's really going on in that Black political class. I think that really having the rubber meet the road might go a long way. Like, I really think, for example, I'm really trying to figure out all those schools in Chicago that are making billions of dollars by not teaching kids how to read and not teaching kids how to do math. I need to understand, what do they have to do to justify the money that they're receiving? Is it just an easy blank paycheck? Do they just get paid no matter what? Well, that's part of your problem. You don't have any incentive structure there, right? Because I think that if they were only being paid if the kids came out reading and doing math at an adequate level, you would see that behavior change. But the fact that there's no consequences, and that you have politicians that will convince you that we have to support the teachers' labor union no matter what, no matter how badly educated the kids are being, or how badly they're being treated. That's a problem. That's a real problem. And what that reflects to me is, again, that watering down of the Black agenda, right? Where you'll have a Black leader show up, and he'll be more supportive of the teachers' union than he is of the Black community. And I just personally think nothing wrong with the teachers union. I'm not against it. I'm actually pro union. But if you're not doing your job, there has to be some sort of accountability. And also, I want you to understand what's happening with the Black community. So what's happening with you is you're getting taxation without representation. So how many of you pay taxes? Did everybody pay their taxes this year? It's April 19th, so I'm sure all of y'all paid your taxes, and a lot of you probably hurting for paying your taxes. So you're paying all these taxes to these government officials who don't use that tax money to help you. They actually use that tax money to help those who are lobbying for the money, the corporations that are lobbying for government contracts. They use the tax money to go toward groups that maybe have a bigger part of the population base. This money is not being used to help the community. So what's happening is that part of your wealth drain is actually from the fact that you're being taxed and you're not receiving the benefits of that taxation. So, I don't know all the answers right away, but I think the one first step is an awareness. And I think also not having a fear of being critical and kind of saying, this isn't going to work. Because that's one thing we know, right? One thing we know for sure is that what has been done so far has not worked. In fact, I almost am really to the point where I really think we have to acknowledge that the vast majority of the civil rights era was a misguided, sad, dark part of Black history. And I know that's in complete contradiction to everything that you learned in school, because there's an agenda there. There's an agenda to fold Black people into the mix, drain your community so that, other people can have some sort of greater good, and sort of have you left behind, and you're struggling and your families are falling apart and everything else. I personally think that the civil rights movement was a failure. And I hate saying it. It makes me sad to have to say that. It almost feels sacrilegious. But I think that when you're educating your own kids and you're sort of teaching them these things, and teaching them in a way that's different from the way we were raised, you're giving them an opportunity. You're giving them a chance. Because if you think about some of those core areas of economic and political strength that a community needs, what do you need? You need educated, people in the community, the more educated and well-trained people you have in the community who are educated in the right way with the right skills, the right values, the more successful that community is going to be. Black, white, green, or whatever. If you have a community where everybody is educated, at a high level, has the right skills, that community is going to be successful no matter what color you are, right? So that's what you need. You need education. Why are the kids not getting it? Well, because they're going to schools that are not doing their job. What's the solution? The solution is that parents have to step in order to fulfill that gap. Well, why aren't they stepping in? Well, because some of the parents are crazy and ignorant or struggling or broken or whatever, right? Daddy's in prison, mama is working 3 jobs. She's afraid of school too, right? So unfortunately, a lot of the people that we identify with are just not in a position to really fight that fight. But some of you are. And so in order to fight for your family, I think starting with that education piece, I want you to really think carefully about what's going into the brain of your child, the same way you think about what food goes into your body. And so the way I look at it is, our kids go to public school, they do, and they're learning at school. And fortunately, their schools are decent schools. Nothing against the school, but I make sure that I am a primary educator of these kids in terms of teaching them, like, look, okay, this is what you learned in school, but here's how the world really works, and here's what you really need to know. Okay, you're a black man, you really got to learn how to have your own business, because working for people sucks when you're a black male, because one little thing, a little accusation or whatever, they're not going to treat you right. Now, you can go get that job if you want, but there's a difference between working because you want to versus working because you have to. And I really want you to have options. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. Let's talk about what that means to head a family. Let's talk about what that means to, to be a husband, all these other things, right? So that's the first area, right? Education. You've got to intervene on that. You have access to all the best education on earth right there on your laptop. You have access to everything from Google searches to Chat GPT to YouTube, everything, just so much stuff out here. There's no excuse for you not to be able to educate your kids. Number two is family structure. These broken families, my God, this has been one of the most devastating things to happen to the black community. It's like a social version of a nuclear bomb when you have so many babies that are born and don't even have a fighting chance to have a mother and a father that are in the house trying to maintain a family, trying to raise this child together. So what is happening online in a lot of cases is there is a massive re-education campaign kind of occurring right now where you've got factions of the community. Sure, you got the ignorance out here, for real. We know that's out there. But then you've got so many people that are allowing us to really reinstill the pride of being a good father, right? The pride of loving a black woman, the pride of loving a black man, the pride of having a black family. And I don't want you to ignore that, right? So when you start seeing the ignorance and the ratchetness and the craziness, just know that there's so many people that are more determined than ever to get the tools and the skills that they need to develop a strong family. And let me tell you, that plays out so heavily in all your outcomes: health, wealth, relationships, everything. Especially when you talk about wealth and aging and retirement and all that. Keeping that family together, that becomes your source of fortification. So when that one person, that single woman who don't need no man, or that man who wants to just be a player and don't want to commit to anybody and doesn't care about black women or doesn't care about his kids, watch what happens when those people get past the age of about 50, 55, or 60, and they start hitting health problems, and they start getting older, and they start actually needing support, or they run into a financial crisis, right? Watch what occurs. That leads to a struggle, because you don't have a tribe, you don't have a clique, you don't have a gang, you don't have a group, you don't have a crew. Nobody's there to really back you up. So you're out here doing everything by yourself because you followed along with an agenda. I knew a lady, I'm not going to say her name, but she is a famous black feminist that if I said her name, you would instantly know who I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say her name. I know somebody that worked with her, and she admired her a lot. She looked up to her and would learn from her and everything else, read all her stuff. And she said that when this lady, that she confessed to her when she was about maybe 65, 70 years old, she said, I've been fighting this whole fight my whole life, and it's been against the patriarchy and this, that, and the other. And she said, one day it really hit me when I went to the hospital and I needed a ride home. And she said, I had nobody to pick me up to take me home from the hospital. And she said that when she heard that, she understood the difference between people talking the talk versus what people actually really want to do and what they're actually doing. Like the thing is that you need each other, right? We need each other. Men we need women. We need black women. We have to respect them. We get frustrated, but we have to respect them. The same thing is true with women. This idea of not of thinking that you can raise a son without his father involved and really thinking that that's just okay and this dandy and fine is, I'm sorry, that's an insane concept. I don't know if I offended anybody by saying that. I don't care. Uh, it would be insane for me to think I can raise those girls without their mother. It would be ridiculous for me to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. The mom's not here. I can be the mama and the daddy. I can't be the mother and the father. And so I think that rebuilding, restoring those families, I think is so important. We have to do that. And then there's a process. There's training that you can get, right? You can read books. You can watch YouTube videos and go and get a therapist, and there's so many people that can help you with that, right? So don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself. But I think the education piece, um, the family piece, and then lastly, of course, the economic piece. I mean, the economic piece is so important. And we've talked about that, so I'm not going to reiterate all that. But basic stuff: investing, starting businesses, avoiding things like student loans, avoiding things that like corporate jobs, being on the plantation for the rest of your life and all this other stuff. Understanding the difference between being a renter and an owner, and making that part of your family culture is that creates economic fortification. There are a lot of black people out here that people don't talk about, but there are a lot of black people who have more money than most white people. There are a lot of black people who have more economic security than most white people do because they took steps that were different from what the masses of black people do. Their consumer habits were different. Where they invested their time was very different. The way they get up and go to work every day, the things they work on every day was very different. How they think about economics is very different. So that's really important. The last area I'd say that I've really processed a lot that I think we should really think about is just in terms of physical health. You may or may not know, but there's like this massive epidemic of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and everything else that's kind of happening. And again, that's another one of those health issues, like just like the deaths of young black people that gets ignored because it doesn't fit the agenda, right? So, and what I mean by that is black death is pretty much almost completely ignored when kids getting shot in the hood every single day, stuff like that. That doesn't get any sort of attention from media because it doesn't fit a political agenda, right? If a white man kills a black man, then it fits an agenda, so then it's therefore it becomes a national story. If it doesn't fit the agenda, you don't even hear about it. Well, the same thing is true with health. During the pandemic, what fit the agenda was black people are dying from this virus. Everybody needs to get their jab because it fit the political agenda. Also, it fit the corporate agenda because pharmaceutical companies were making money by promoting these shots. And what was interesting to me was that if you were looking at all the things that killed black people in a given year, that virus would be way down on the list. It'd be like number 14 or something, right? And there are so many other things that were killing lots of black people that get no attention at all. So this contradicts this false idea, this nonsense that we're doing this because we care about black people. Because if you cared about black people, you would be addressing the things that were killing black people. But no, it's so rather than us sort of exploring like why you have diabetes so much more than everybody else, because by the way, diabetes is the kind of the gateway illness. There's the epidemic of diabetes is extraordinary. I think in the 1940s, about 1 in every 300 people had type 2 diabetes. Now it's like 1 in 9 above like the age of 40 or something like that. A lot of the food that you have, like juvenile diabetes, was virtually unheard of in the 1950s. It's all over the place now because kids are eating a bunch of crap that's really screwing them up at an early age. So effectively, if you're really thinking about health of black people, you again have to go off the grid and really explore that and say, okay, what's really going on? Then what you'll find is that when you look at processed foods and the sugar and everything else that they put in the food, that's part of what's killing you. So I would say that given that health is more important than wealth, health is not wealth. Health is more important than wealth. If you don't believe me, go find a dying billionaire and ask him, if I took away all your billions for you to get all your health back, would you be willing to make that sacrifice? I bet you most of them would say yes. If you ask a dying billionaire, which would you rather have, your health or your money? He would say my health, right? So health is not wealth. Health is more important than wealth. Also, time is not money. Time is more important than money. I've lost money. I got it back. Time, I've lost time. I've never gotten that time back. I'll never be 22 years old again, right? So ultimately, given that health is wealth, um, or health is more important than wealth, then I think really sort of processing our health is really important because there's so many things that are happening that we don't talk about. Like for example, I know the Black Panther guy, Chadwick Boseman, died from colon cancer. Well, then that's when I found out from a friend of mine who's an expert on colon cancer that there's a colon cancer epidemic affecting Black men all across this country. And he talked about things like soda and the processed food and everything else. And then, of course, with men, we don't go to the doctor and stuff like that. And again, if you're leaning, if you are a slave mentally and you need someone else to lead you to that conversation, like you need white people to start talking about it before you really realize it's an epidemic. Like, so for example, you'll get scared to death when it comes to COVID. You'll talk about the virus all day long, right? But you won't talk about colon cancer and diabetes and all these things that are really truly killing Black people at a much higher level. Then that's a problem for me. That tells me you're not really you're not really trying to be an intellectual leader. You're being a follower. So to me, if you want to talk about the virus, you can believe whatever you want. Masks, getting vaxxed. I don't care about that stuff. But I mean, you can do whatever you want. But then at that point, lead me to other conversations that are more impactful. Like help me understand things that just don't make sense. Like why would we talk about talk about the importance of Black Lives Mattering and Black people dying from the virus, but at the same time, you will promote singers like Lizzo who promote obesity and tell you that obesity is body positivity and that it's a wonderful thing. It's not a wonderful thing. Obesity, people die from that. That like Black people die from being overweight. Most of us are overweight by the time we're 40, 45 years old. And it's because we haven't had those necessary cultural conversations to really talk about what health actually looks like. I actually had to get around a lot of people that were not Black to even learn about other ways to view health. I started getting around people that would eat stuff that my family never ate when growing up. I would go to run races with my wife where I'd see some 80-year-old running a marathon. I didn't know 80-year-olds could run. I thought when you were 80, you're supposed to be old, fat, and sick. I did not know that you can actually be healthy at 60, 70, 80 years old by taking care of your body. So what I encourage you to do, here's what I'm going to leave you with, is you got to set your own agenda. There's always this conversation about the Black agenda. What is the Black agenda? What is the Black agenda? I kind of don't want to know what the Black agenda is. I really would rather know what is your Black agenda. You're a wife, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a mother, you're a son, you're all these things. Why not? What is your agenda? What is your agenda, and how does that agenda, swing away from whatever agenda they set for you, when you were born? There's so many things that they just sort of tell you, like this is what you do to be Black. This is what Black people do. And I just think that's that is so destructive. It's so bad. The outcomes are so terrible. So many unhealthy things that we just think we're supposed to do because we're Black that will kill you right in front of your face, and you won't even stop to even ask yourself, like, wait a minute, this don't make no sense, man. I'm not doing this stuff. And it takes courage to walk away from that. Do you know what one of the greatest keys to my success was as a Black man? I kid you not. I was an oddball when I was in college. I was the top. I was known as the straight A student guy, right? Even before I got known and all that, I was the straight A guy. I was the only guy, the only Black kid on campus that had like almost a 4.0 GPA. And you know what? One of my keys of success was I stopped hanging around about 80% of the Black men that I knew on campus. Like I didn't hang when it came to me setting my goals. I realized I can't be like you. You're gonna lose. I don't want to be. I don't want to make the choices you make. I don't know where it came from. I guess it came from my father. My father's one of those people that just doesn't give a damn what anybody thinks. And I guess I got some of that in me. But literally, that was my secret to success. Was I formed my plan of success independent of other people's expectations or what other people were doing. And I think that the benefit came from the fact that I wasn't accepted by Black people or white people. Like I grew up around white people, but but I was still Black. I was too Black for them. And I grew up around, and then when I was around Black people, I didn't do stuff like I didn't know all the dances and I didn't necessarily talk like other black people and do stuff other black people did, right? So there was a little bit of disconnect and a little rejection there. I was like the corny guy, I guess, right? But I identify with my black identity. I just decided on my own terms what that would look like, right? So what ended up happening was the best gift God ever gave me was to make me an outcast. Because when I became an outcast, I was free. I was free to explore and figure out who I am, what I wanted, understand how the world really works without any constraints based on what other people, believe in what other people were doing. And so what happened was I got to college and I just, I was kind of a loner and I would just kind of look around and I would say, this is stupid. I'm not, wait, why are y'all going to these parties? Like, and getting drunk, like you're gonna go out here and do something, you're gonna get locked up. Like, I don't want to do that. Or you're bored, you don't even like coming to these parties, they're boring, you can't even talk to each other because the music's too loud. Or why would you spend more time preparing for your step show than you spent studying for your math class? I don't understand that. Oh, you did it because all your friends are barking and whatever y'all do. And you think that's cool and you want to fit in. You need to fit in. And I think that was it. It's like, no, I don't need to fit in. I was seeking something that's better than fitting in. I was seeking something better than acceptance from a group. I was seeking self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is much more powerful than acceptance from a group because the group can enslave you. The group can kick you out if you deviate, if you challenge something or question something, right? I don't even seek acceptance from you all. When you're listening, I like it. I like talking to you. I'm glad we can relate. And I get on the internet and I say the things I say because I'm looking for other people who kind of see the same things I see. And I love you for that. But it's like, nuh-uh, I'm not letting nothing hold me hostage. Even the people who love you can hold you hostage because they can get you to the point where, like, for example, because I do what I do, I speak on pro-black stuff. There are people who think I'm supposed to rock with them when they talk about how much they hate white people. I don't hate white people. I don't like having hate in my heart. I'm okay with anybody as long as you respect me and don't mistreat me. We're fine. But when you fight me, I'm going to fight you back. That's where I stand. So what I would say is that I think that was a superpower I developed that worked out really well. It's a little bit lonely, but if you can get okay with that and truly accept yourself and truly trust yourself, you'll find solutions that other people can't see. Like, you'll come along and you'll say you're going to do something. Like, for example, I went and told my family, I was like, yeah, I think I want to learn how to fly airplanes. And they're like, whoa, oh my God. Oh, I didn't know anybody could fly. Wow. Oh my, that's crazy, right? But people fly airplanes. There are thousands of people that can fly an airplane. It's just where I come from, nobody does that, right? Like, that was like weird. That was like almost like an idea from outer space. But a lot of your best solutions lie in outer space. In mathematics, we have a term for that. We call that orthogonality. Orthogonality. And one way to visualize orthogonality, and all it means is going into your own lane. It means kind of operating on your own frequency. So orthogonality is like this. Let's say you're looking at a bunch of two-dimensional slaves. They think they can either go left or right, right? That's all they know. They know left, right, north, south, east, west. They just sort of can only operate on a plane, like on a chessboard. They can only operate on the top of this book, right? And then let's say somebody says, wait a minute, instead of going forward or backward or side to side, we can actually go up, right? Well, then you go up and then you got all these options that were never available to you because now you're operating in 3 dimensions and they were only operating in 2. You're playing chess, they were playing checkers. So their moves were limited. Your moves are infinite now because you went to a higher level. You went to a higher dimension. And another example in real life is if you think about somebody who's raised to be an employee and all they know to make money is to get a job, get a better job, get a raise on your job, they don't have a lot of moves. Those are the only moves they have. And then they're coming in with no inheritance, no resources to back them up at all. So they're pretty much economic slaves. So they only got certain moves. And those moves get blocked off. The white man can say, he says, you only got 2 moves. I can block off both of them. So that means you're under my control. But then somebody comes along, a young black kid like your children comes in, and they're operating on a different level. They're like, yeah, I could get a job. I could do all those things, but I can also start a business. Also, I've got assets. I've got an inheritance because my parents, had insurance policies and were investing for me since I was a child. So I own real estate. I have stocks. So I have all these other resources. And then on top of that, I've actually realized that, happiness matters more than money. So there are a lot of other things I want to do that don't involve me getting up and going to work every day anyway, right? That child is going to be 10 times happier than the kid who was born with no options, who only had a couple of moves. Like, I can get a job, get a better job, I'm gonna go to college, get a good job, hope I make a lot of money, whatever. And then when it doesn't work out, they're very frustrated, they're very upset. Whereas the kid that's got 50 moves as opposed to the one who's got two, the kid with 50 moves has a greater likelihood of finding the solution that works for him. And again, this goes back to mathematics. When I talk about that concept of orthogonality, it just means leveling up, right? And unfortunately, everybody can't level up because you're indoctrinated to a way of thinking at a very early age. This is all very deliberate. So those of you that are capable of leveling up, I congratulate you. I think honestly, there's only probably 20% of our people that I believe really have the courage or the ability to truly level up. I think that the brainwashing is just so deep. So for those of you that have broken outside of that, my job is to encourage you to not be afraid to do that, to explore that. Because again, speaking mathematically, I'm a mathematician, so I think mathematically a lot. Um, Mathematically speaking, there are mathematical rules that say that if you're solving a problem and you're looking for the optimal solution to that problem, you are better able to find the most optimal solution when you minimize the number of constraints that you have to solve that problem. Basically, that means that a free black man or a free black woman is better able to find their happiness, peace, joy, and fulfillment than a black person who operates as a slave. Because a slave only has a couple of moves. The free black man or free black woman can make any move out there. So expand the number of moves you can make, have the courage to make those moves, and then what you'll do is what you'll find one day is you wake up and you'll be like, gosh, life is pretty good for me. And that's my 2 cents, guys. So thank you for hearing me out. I hope that this was a helpful discussion. I hope that you gained something from this conversation, and I want to just encourage you. I really believe at the end of the day, happiness though matters more than the money. The money is just that tool to get you closer to the happiness, right? So, and I share these things openly to give you just another perspective and help you understand ways that you can actually achieve your goals. Okay. All right. So anyway, I hope we'll support Dr. Anderson. His website is powernomics.com. All his books are there. I'm going to jump into the Black History Reader once we finish Powernomics. We might have a couple more weeks. I'm getting through, a few paragraphs each week. Also, this week I'll be in Houston, April 21st and 22nd for Black Wealth Boot Camp. Just go to BoyceWatkins.com if you want to learn about that. We also actually created a real estate certification program for beginners on the Black Business School. So if you want to get started with real estate, we have a training program called Real Estate 101 with self-study exams, certificate at the end, things like that. It's fairly priced, so feel free to go to BoyceWatkins.com if you'd like to take a look at that, if you think that would be good for your family. In fact, you can actually share the membership with someone in your family too. So have a good day, everybody. It's great to see you, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.